So today I'm going to do some upgrades on this Cort 335 style guitar. First thing I'm going to do is to fit this string organizer from Alibaba, similar to the string butler. Let's just open this up and have a look, see what we get in the package. Okay, so there we are. That's the string organizer. It comes with a little tiny spanner and a couple of plastic washers to sit underneath the string organizer and stop it from scratching the headstock. So, first thing we need to do is take off the two E strings so we can get it on. It fits under these. So let's do that to start off with. Loosen those off. These strings need to be changed anyway, they're quite old ones, so we'll take them off and put some new ones on afterwards. There we are. That's that one off. I won't take them all off for this purpose. Or maybe I will. So, okay, let's take all the strings off. We're going to have to replace them anyway, so. With this nut cut fairly straight, the strings do ping quite badly as you try and tune them up. They tend to stick in the nut, and I know you can get over that by using some lubricant in the nut, but I'm hoping that this little gubbins will do the trick as well. It seems to have worked on the other guitars I've done it on. So let's loosen these off. They're all pretty old strings, these, because I haven't used this guitar for a while. It's a lovely guitar, but the tuning issues did make it less reliable. So let's see if we can improve that. So if I take all of these off, should be using my string winder really, but it's fairly quick doing this anyway. That's three. I might leave one on so that we can save losing the bridge. If you take everything off, the bridge will come loose. So if I leave that last one on, that should hold it in place until I start putting the other strings on. These Cort guitars are very well made. Even the tuners are quite good on it. It wasn't terribly expensive, but it wasn't dirt cheap either. It was bought back in the early 2000s, and I think it was about £300 then. So I don't know how you'd compare that to prices now. Probably £500 or £600 now for the equivalent one. Okay, so they've given us in here. Let's open this up. Use the famous teeth method. So in here there's a little packet with a spanner. You probably can't see that there very well. Let's unwrap it. So we've got a little spanner that should be the right size for the, and it is. And there's a pair of little plastic washers there which go underneath. So first thing we'll do is to remove these nuts, which are little sleeves that go down in, and put the washer in first. Same with this one. We should be able to slide it under that remaining string, okay, so it doesn't loosen off the bridge. Okay. That second little plastic nylon or whatever it is goes under there. Oh, tuner's fallen out. That's held in with little position studs. So let's get those back on quickly. So this then goes here, like that, and then you get it centered as best you can. So if we do these nuts back up, just hold the tuners in place. I won't tighten it up until we get that straight. There we are. just stop those tuners falling off again. So we do this up hand tight for now. Let's use the little spanner just to do it. Okay, so that's just tight enough to hold them in place and allow them to move a little bit. So we need to get that centered on the headstock so that the strings line up correctly. I need to move that one out of the way. That gives it about the same overlap either side. Let's just do that up. If I was going to be really fiddly, really fussy, I would measure in from the outside to that, but I'm just going to do it by eye. That looks about right. I can always adjust, do some fine adjustments later once the strings are on to get them lined up properly. And that is that fitted. So next thing we'll do is restring. So we'll come back, I'll restring and show you as we fit them back on how it lines up on these little wheels. See, there are 4 little wheels there that allow the strings to glide through without catching. Okay, we'll come back once we've got the strings on. I did decide to leave the original strings on in the end, just to prove to myself that it wasn't the strings that were making a difference. So I've now brought this back up to pitch, and the difference is amazing. Whereas these were pinging in the nut all the time, still a bit of a ping there. I think that's from the bridge actually, not the nut, but certainly a lot better. And these are the old strings as well, so there we are. Let's bring it back up to pitch, and then, oh, I'm off the thing, no wonder it's sounding a bit weird. That's not on the... Just come off the saddle at the bottom there. Let's put that back on, there we are. So I'll tune this up, and then the next job that I'm going to do, just unplug the tuner for a second. So the next job we're going to do is to replace this 3-way switch. Oh, let's put it there where we can see it. This 3-way switch, which is the box type. You'll see it in a minute once we take it out. So I'm going to show you how to take that out, and we're going to swap it over for the normal 3-way switch that comes with Gibsons and so on. So that's in the next part. The next thing we're going to do is take this switch out. And in order to do that, I've got something here that's too big to go through the hole. I'm going to tie that to a bit of string, tie it on securely. And the idea of this is that when we take the switch out, we can pass it back through the hole here and it won't get pulled through. I've seen people using bits of rubber tubing and so on pushed over volume controls, but I think this should be fine. So that's attached nice and strongly. It's long enough to allow us to pull it through. So we'll tie that on there nice and tightly. And then we'll loosen off the nut that's holding it in place. See how my knot tying is. Should have given myself a bit more there, but never mind. I think that should be enough. So do a nice strong knot on there. Right, so it's a double knot, so that should hold that in place. And then we've got one of these tools for removing things without scratching the paintwork. So we'll loosen that off. They should pass over that string, okay. There we are, so they're still there. Poke that down through. And the fiddly bit now is going to be to feed it back up through the hole. Might need something to poke it through with. I've seen other people doing this and struggling with it, so let's come around the other side so I can get to it a bit better. See what I'm doing. So those are attached onto this, and it can't get pulled through because that's in the way. So let's see if we can fish it out. I might need a screwdriver or something just to pull it through with. Let's try a screwdriver for now. There we are. I'm hoping that we've got enough space to get it up through this hole. It should do. There we are. Okay. Just. So I've then got some resoldering to do here. So there's enough wire. Okay, so there we are. We've lifted it out far enough, and we can see we've got 1, 2, 3 connections. That's the ground. I'll have to figure out what the connections are. So we'll go and get the new switch now that one's out. And then when we come to pull it back, we've just got to pull the string through, and that will pull it back through, and it'll be attached to the new one at that point. So the main thing here is not to let any of these wires go through. I could probably tape those together in a minute so that they don't get pulled out of the way. I'll just need to check exactly how they're supposed to be wired. So that's for one pickup. That's the back out to this. So that's the centre one. So that's out to the jack, and that's the other pickup. Okay, so I'll go get the new switch, and we'll get some soldering and take that one off, and see if we can feed it all through. So pause it for a second there where I get the new switch. I should have been better prepared. So the next thing I'm going to do is to tape the wires together and actually fix those to the string, because this one's coming off. So we just don't want to lose our connection all the way through there. So let's give us enough to work with, but then I'll tape them all together so you can see it. So I'll get a bit of Gorilla tape. That should be, yeah, that's pretty secure. So that leaves us enough room to work with the wires while we desolder them, and then I can pull them back through afterwards. So they're still attached here, and that will pull the new switch. So this one will come off. I can actually undo that now, but let's do that actually. I'll take the tip off, and that will go over the new tip once we fit it. That we won't need this switch anymore. It's a fairly cheap and cheerful one, so we'll get rid of that. I'm going to put something down on here to protect the top of the guitar while we're soldering, because obviously we've got to solder in close proximity here. So we'll get a mat and put that down over it while I desolder it and change the wires over to the new one. So we'll pause it again there while I get the mat, because I'm not prepared. So at this point, I cunningly managed to lose my microphone, which was clipped onto my shirt. I went and answered the door, put a bag over my shoulder, and promptly knocked the microphone off. So here you can see I'm removing the old switch, tinning the soldering iron to make sure that the solder flows so I can remove it properly. The one I'm doing here is the earth wire, which is onto the casing. It's quite difficult to desolder that because it was pretty solid. Make sure the soldering iron is a decent one and it's turned up nice and hot so you can remove it. And you can see I've put a mat here. It's a silicone mat to protect the guitar from the soldering iron. Make sure I don't drop any hot solder on it or scratch it. I should really have used it earlier probably to prevent scratching it when I was putting the switch on it, but there we are. You can see it's a bit fiddly to get this off. A bit more solder on the soldering iron, checking the temperature to make sure it's hot enough. I'll have another go. Put a bit more solder on. If you're desoldering things, ironically, you quite often need to add solder to help it flow. I think here we are, it's come off now. So that's removed the earth wire. So let's just get that out the way. And I'm checking here to see which one is which. So I think that one is the neck pickup. The center is the output to the output jack, and then the other one is for the other pickup. And you can see here I'm explaining which one goes where, and I'll put a diagram up here so you can see which wire goes which. When you're doing these, it's quite important to make sure you get the orientation right. So you can see I'm want to make sure that once I've wired them up, it's switching the right way around, because you don't want it going the wrong way. You don't want to have the bridge pickup up and the neck pickup down. So you just need to make sure you know which way around you're doing it. So here I'm just looking at the different orientations of the switch, and you can probably see there you've got 3 positions for the wires at the switch end, and on the other end of the switch is the earth. I was looking at this, and I did discover, as you'll find in a minute, that the wire for the earth was a bit short for this switch, because as I found out too late, I soldered it on, and then you'll see here I'm soldering it on. So when you're soldering, you heat up the metal that you're soldering onto and put the solder to the metal, rather than putting melting the solder onto the soldering iron. Just making it nice and secure as much as I can. It would have been helpful really to use some helping hands or something, but this was okay on the mat. It's a little bit fiddly. There, so that's a bit more. Yeah, a bit more. This was quite fiddly. It's quite a thick chunk of metal for the earth on this particular type of switch. I think this was one. There we are. So that's tinned it. Now you can see what I'm doing here is connecting the earth wire to that side. And with the benefit of hindsight, you'll find out now that I realised fairly quickly that it's too short, and I need to lengthen it by putting an extra bit of wire on there to make it reach across, because obviously I can't mess around with the existing wires. I didn't want to desolder them all and separate them out. So there we are. It was nice and secure. There we go, it's the moment of reckoning. I think to myself, that's no good. They won't reach. I can see the mental process here, my brain ticking over and thinking, this ain't going to work. So I desolder it again. There we are. And I'll now have a quick break while I go and find a bit of wire to lengthen that. Let's see. There we are, I'm back. The switch magically moved around. So now I'm going to fit, I have fitted, I've soldered on there. You can see I've soldered a short piece of wire on, and I'm going to put a bit of heat sleeving over it to make sure that the connection between the 2 wires is nicely insulated off. So we'll solder that one onto the existing earth wires, and that will then give me the space to reach across with the other wires to the other side of the switch for the 2 inputs from the pickups and the output to the output socket. Of course, typically you can't see what I'm doing because my hand is in the way, but this was a bit of a fiddly process. I know I put the heat sleeve over a bit too quickly, and it melted on the hot solder. So note to self, wait for the solder to cool down before you try and use the heat sleeving. You'll see here I have to fiddle around for quite a while, cutting off the extra bits where it had melted. Here come the snippers. Right, so the only way I could do that was just cut it back a bit where the heat sleeving had melted. This stuff's pretty useful because it does allow you to basically put a new insulation layer around a piece of newly installed wire so it doesn't touch on things. Wherever I'm doing wiring jobs, I will usually use a bit of heat sleeving on the earth's wires just to cover them up and make sure that nothing's catching. And well, in fact, on all the wiring, wherever you've got a join between two wires or something that could touch on things, heat sleeving is very handy. It just slides over and then you put a flame over it just to shrink it down. You'll see in a minute. So that slides up over the wires. There we are. So that's covered up that join up nicely. And then we just need to heat that up. I disappear here to go and get a fire lighter from the other room. So what we'll do, let's edit this bit out in a minute. So here you can use a lighter just to shrink that heat sleeving down and make it a nice tight fit on the wire. It seems to work best with a naked flame like that. It shrinks down quite quickly and forms a nice seal around the wire to stop it shorting on things. So now you can see I've got a long enough connection from the earth to allow the selector switch to the other three wires to connect to the other end of the selector switch. Those three there, 1, 2, 3. I'm pointing at the middle one. These ones have two common ones in the middle. I'm not quite sure, it's just the way that the switch is made. So you just bend those together and solder the output to those. I'm not actually snipping the wire here. I just wanted something to pull on it while I desoldered. And that was the thing that I had to hand. So I'm not pinching too hard on that. I didn't want to cut the wire off. I think it was too fiddly in the end and I gave up and just ended up pulling it off by hand. Yeah, there we are. So what I do tend to do is to solder them back on as I go so that it saves any confusion. So that was the middle one I've just taken off, I think. So that will go to the two. I'll solder those two middle ones together. You've seen the diagram earlier, so you can see which ones they are. I'll put a bit of solder on there, poke it through the hole to give it a bit of a mechanical connection as well. And then make sure it's nicely soldered on. Just try and keep myself tidy here so things aren't getting in the way. So here I've poked it through and then bent it over a bit. That'll hold it in place while I solder it. Could really do with a mat with a slot in it for this sort of thing. Maybe I'll do that with this. This silicone mat was from Alibaba, cost a couple of quid. You can't really see it on this, I don't think, but there are sort of markings on it, so you can. It's useful for doing electrical work. You've got numbered little indentations on it, so you can put components into them and know where they are. So that was the wire to the output jack, and now I've just got to wire up the two pickups. And I think what I'm doing here, no, I was going to do that one first. I think at this point I did double check and see which pickup was which, so we'll see in a minute. And that was still hot, so I burnt my finger on it. Not quite sure what I'm doing here. Oh, so same thing again, poke the wire through the little hole. I've already put a bit of solder on there. And then we get, as the wire goes through the hole, you get a mechanical connection as well as just a solder connection. When you can, it's always best to do that. It just saves it getting pulled loose if the... Yeah, so I think here I checked to see, make sure, yes. So I'm plugging it in. I'm just using a little spark go there as an easy way of connecting up, and a couple of Wi-Fi wireless bugs to connect to it. And this way I can do some quick tests as I go along. So I want to just make sure that I've got the correct pickup. So I'm just checking them. And I think this was the bridge one I've just wired up. So I just thought, well, before I put it all back in, at least I'll know that I've definitely got the right one. So we put mat back under and finish off the soldering now. So I know that that was the bridge pickup, so I know which way around it is. So now we're going to move on to the other pickup wire. And solder that one on, same process again. Try and get a mechanical connection so that it's nice and firm. That's the last one coming off. Now I can get rid of that old switch. There we are. So last wire to go on. Then the fun starts getting it back in the body. There we are, so through the hole. Put the mat back in place so it doesn't drop on the thing. It's a bit of a wrestle with these. The trouble is the wires aren't all that long on this one to allow you to place it in a comfortable position to solder it on. I was just showing you there, that is completely heat proof, this mat. It's a silicone one. Oh, the cat's having another explore in the background. So that should be our last wire connected. There we are. So you can see the earth wire there goes across to the far end of the pickup, and then the three other wires, the two inputs and the output, are on that end. So here I just put a bit of tape around it because I was thinking that there's still a little bit of exposed earth wire, and I wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to touch the contacts and short out. If you end up with exposed wire there, it could touch the contacts at the end of the switch and end up killing your sound, which obviously you don't want. So I'm just putting a bit of tape around this to prevent that from happening. Insulating tape would have been the best thing, but I had some, I think this is Gorilla Tape, it's the stickiest stuff I've ever had to work with. If you ever want to stick stuff together, Gorilla Tape's the boy. Not sponsored by Gorilla Tape, but goodness me. Okay, so I need to reattach the string, and this is where I end up wrestling with the Gorilla Tape because it is so sticky. I need to get this back off. You'll see it takes a while here. But it was there to hold that string in place because that's there to pull it back through the hole. What you don't want to do at this point is try and manually poke around with it and push it back up through. I mean, it's probably feasible with this three-way selector switch, but if you were using, you can imagine that with the volume and tone controls, if you were resoldering those, it would be an absolute impossibility to poke something in there, get your finger in to push them back up through the holes in the body. So I've got to tie the string back on. Very exciting stuff to watch, isn't it? Someone untying a bit of string. Hopefully you're still awake at this point. If you are, this may be the point at which you fall asleep. I think I gave up trying to untie it completely. I can't remember now. Yeah, I did. So I just tied it on as it was. There we are. So you tie it on around the base of the little toggle switch there, underneath the screw-on tip. And then, because that string is already going up through the hole, you can pull it through. It's a bit fiddly to get the orientation right again, because I wanted it, you know, we need it to be switching in a way that's sensible, so that in the up position it's selecting the neck pickup, middle in the middle obviously, and down for the bridge pickup. So I'm still struggling with the tape. Resort to trying to use clippers to cut it off. I think there's a saying, if you can't stick it on with Gorilla Tape or gaffer tape, you haven't used enough Gorilla or gaffer tape. paraphrasing badly, but there we are. So wrestling with this, wrestling with the tape, still pulling at it. Goodness me. I need to cut this bit out. Or should I let you all see the suffering? Come on, you can do it. There we are. Thank goodness. Right, so we've got a bit of tape around the earth there to stop it shorting, you can see. So it now goes back into the body of the guitar, and we'll pull it back up through using our string, or whatever you've attached it with. I'd prefer using the string. I think I've seen Mick on that pedal show using rubber tubing, and I would worry about that just pulling off, because what you don't want to do is have it detached when it's inside. Otherwise you've got to fiddle and try and pull it back through again. This is fiddly enough as it is. You've got to turn it, make sure it's facing the right way. You can see someone like me with short stubby fingers, it's quite difficult to poke it back up through the hole, pull it with the string all at the same time. I think I can't remember what I'm trying to do here actually, chasing it around the inside of the guitar by the look of it. Not quite sure why. There we are. Oh, I had to pull it back out. Why was that then? Oh yes, I do remember. I'd forgotten to take the the fixing screws off the top. So I had to take it all back out, undo the screw. This is the screw that will then go back on, and the washer that will go back on the top of the guitar once it's all in place. So take those off, put them safely to one side. I think just set them on the mat. Yeah, there they are. So that was a bit of a planning failure. So when you're doing this, don't forget to take the washer and the screw and the nut off. Okay, so now I can pull it back through. So back into the body again. And we're going to pull it up through. We can just fit it in. It's important if you're doing this, especially with one of these hollow body guitars, make sure you have a measure of the depth of it before you buy the switch, I guess. This one's fine, it fitted in okay, but some of them have really long, like a long piece between the switch itself and the little selector at the top. I can't think what you'd call them, but they go back into the body a long way, and it might not even fit in. So here we are, I've got it through now. So what I do need to do is to hold it in place while I refit the washer and the nut. And of course I've got to turn it round so it's all facing the right way. So this is a bit of a fiddle here. Keep the string on at this point until you're happy that it's firmly in place. What I should have done is to fit those, while it was all out of the guitar, I should have fitted the washer and the nut over the string so that I could just then feed them back down and tighten them up in place. But this is fine. I'm holding it in place. Make sure it doesn't disappear into the body. I had a bit of a failure at this point, or you'll see in a minute. I dropped the switch tip into the body of the guitar. I think that's, yeah. I don't know if that's here or in a minute. But at least that I could just rattle it out, tip the guitar up. So I'm holding it in place while I tighten it up. You've got a right and a wrong way with these little grippers. One's for loosening, one's for tightening. So if the teeth are only on one side of it. So I've got it the right way around now, so that's tightened that up. Let's get all the string out the way. Yep, I did. I dropped the switch tip in there already, so you can see here. I'm going to retrieve it. I'm suffering so that you can learn. There it is. Right, now screw it back in and don't drop it back on again. Drop it back in again. Oh, nearly. Oh. There we are, screw that back on. quite a nice chrome one, this one. I think I bought it for another guitar specifically. I had to buy a pair of them, so I'm just trying to get the orientation right now, make sure it's facing the right way. Tighten it right up. That's about right, not quite. Before it's really tight, you can still move it around a little bit just to get it exactly where you want it, so that the up and down or back and forth, depending on how you want yours word, make sure it's in the right position. Then you can just pinch it up with the tool. There we are. And there we are, job done. Just testing it now and make sure everything does what it should. Guitar sounds, guitar sounds, guitar sounds. I'll do a little quick tap test. Yeah. Checking them both. I have a feeling I didn't have all the volume controls up at this, but yeah, there we are. I turned them all up because they got turned down when I was messing around with things later. So fortunately, I did have the positioning correctly. Just double checking to make sure it's nice and straight. Working in all positions. There we are, job done. All that needs to be done now is to tidy up and put everything away. So thanks for watching, and we'll try and do some more of these if you're interested. Just some simple. There's the old switch. It's actually a Cortec own brand. It wasn't bad for these. It was a nice solid switch for that type, but I don't really like those box switches. I think they're usually a sort of cheaper alternative. This guitar is a Cort made by, I think they're the biggest guitar manufacturers in the world. This was from their Korean factory back in the early 2000s. They're now in Indonesia, turning out some lovely guitars for people like PRS. I won't give you a list of them because I don't know for sure. I know PRS are definitely one of their